candidate, but like we say, once a journalist, always one. Mr. Joseph Kabuleta, good morning to you and thank you for coming through.
Good morning, Mildred, and thank you for inviting me. Are you the one who invited me? No, you're not. So, but anyway, thank you for...
My producer invites you on my behalf.
Yeah, okay. So, there's no thanks due there.
You have withdrawn
but anyhow,
it.
I have withdrawn it.
Interesting, but it's still fine. I also have Mr. Napito Ekomoloit, who is a veteran journalist, has been a member of parliament. I am trying to think through my mind if he was on the floor of parliament and that came through, what would he say? He's been a presidential president, he's been everything. And currently now we are talking about beer, right?
Yes.
That's a discussion we're in.
Nice
Mr. Ekomoloit, a very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mildred.
What's NBL giving us during this festive season?
Well, I think we shall give you a curtain raiser for the country opening up, and you can prepare to enjoy
Okay. I know there's so many people who can't wait for that. And Mr. Alex Arunitwe, thank you so much for coming through. Also, a senior journalist, it's always a pleasure having your time here.
Thank you, Mildred. Good morning to all the viewers out there, and thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure being here.
A pleasure having you as well. I'll start off with a former member of parliament. If you were put in the position that a minister is inviting an entire house for another semi-parliamentary meeting, because that is what the speaker termed it as, what does this mean? And what is the problem anyway? It's calling members of parliament to update you and get to discuss with you on what ought to be done. Where is the problem? She's a member of the house as well.
Well, Mildred, in another parliament, in another country, I would be outraged. In Uganda,
No more.
no more. I'm actually surprised that members of parliament periodically pretend that they are in a normal parliament, in a textbook parliament, in a textbook democracy. But there are so many things that would be considered abnormal in other parliaments, in the Commonwealth parliament, parliamentary system. But in Uganda, they have been normalized. And the debate here is whether parliament should be in parliament building or it should be in Kololo. The fact that Kololo is the alternative parliament was normalized by parliament itself. Right from swearing in, there was no debate. Nobody said, look, even if it's COVID, can we find a way of making sure that business takes place within the surroundings of the normal parliament.
But Mr. Napito,
Just hold on,
you know that parliament is not the building itself.
Yes, but
Any place can be
so
declared
the issue now
parliament.
is, that's why the First Lady, the Minister of Education thinks they can go to Kololo. So I think Kololo has been normalized as the alternative parliament. That's the first problem. It was necessary due to COVID, so now, but the lines have been blurred. The other thing is that I think we all know in this country that President Museveni is not a normal president. He's abnormally powerful. That's a well-known fact.
Okay.
We are the only country in the region without age limit for the president, without term limits for the president.
Without any limits.
So I mean, it's good for parliament to debate these things, but it's not because the country is going to lose sleep, you know. And I think the Minister of Education is also not a normal Minister of Education. Maybe in the whole of Africa, she's the only Minister of Education who is also a First Lady. So we are dealing with very abnormal situations, and people try to fix them to be normal.
Okay.
So I don't think there is a big issue. I actually agree with the Speaker Olanya that those who want to go should go. Those who don't want to go should not go. Because even in the parliament itself, there are people who don't attend for so many sessions. So that's the debate. But of course...
So there are lots of abnormalities.
Yeah.
The abnormal minister, abnormal president, abnormal parliament.
I wouldn't be surprised if I was in that parliament.
Okay.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Would you go?
But for the opposition, I think they are making the right noises. That's what an opposition should do. They should criticize what they see is excesses. But for the NRM people, I think they're also going to be, unlike, they will have to go.
All right.
But of course, the cancellation, again, speaks maybe the fact that the First Lady has also listened and maybe there'll be a compromise.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Napito. Alex,
Yes.
where is the problem anyway? Because the Parliament itself is waiting for a communication from the Ministry of Education. And probably this was an avenue, or this is an avenue, it was postponed, we don't know which other date. This is an avenue that could be used to have that discussion come through.
No, the problem is the way we are set up. I agree with Onapito. Maybe one time we were in a conference in Nairobi, and one of the Kenyan ministers, I remember, was talking about something and said, with the due respect to some of the Ugandans in this room, he said, there are some things that we can do here, but there are some things we cannot do. And then that minister said, for example, President Uhuru Kenyatta cannot appoint First Lady of Kenya a minister. And then he went on to say that even if it was to happen, he said, what's her name, the First Lady of Kenya?
Margaret.
She would
Margaret.
be too smart not to accept that kind of appointment. I think the problem is just there, that you have a First Lady, which it's an office that is already, or a responsibility that is already somewhere. Then you add that person to be a minister, and then those are the problems you get with the current issue we are handling, because the argument is, despite all our issues and the way we are set up, is that Parliament, in some way, it is established to supervise the ministers. And now a person that the Parliament is going to supervise is more or less summoning Parliament to appear before her. I think that is the problem for me.
Okay.
That's the problem. So where will the, what
I
then?
think the big question is, does Parliament supervise her?
That's another
Yes.
interesting
So
one.
then where will then the Parliament mandate be? How will Parliament supervise that kind of minister? Yeah. So yeah.
All right, Joseph Kabuleta, you've been pacing and nodding your head. It's a Minister of Education, right? We're thinking about reopening of schools in less than 2 months. And she's here saying, let's meet and talk. Let's talk about these issues before January comes. Where would the problem be?
No, you should have asked Joseph first that if you had one, would his wife now be a minister?
Maybe we'll get to that. But let's start off with this one here.
No, the problem actually, as Onapito had said earlier, for him he sees the problem as when Koloro was normalized. The problem, and I saw it coming, even if I was not in politics, I was in sports, was the problem was when the First Lady started developing ambitions of entering politics, fast-tracked her education. Somehow things went through, and somehow the next thing we know, she had sat for S6, and then she went and chose a constituency. And you knew that the minute she had made up her mind to do that, they had to do everything to make sure that she goes through, because it was not going to be hard that, you know, the First Lady went to stand for Parliament and failed to go through. And then the problem came when she was appointed minister. And it was done so well because if you remember when she was put on the list of ministers, there were so many, and those parliaments were a bit more, you know, radical than this one. There were so many people who were baying for blood and what. But in the classic Museveni Machiavellian style, he did a number of things. First of all, he put Tom Butime to be minister in charge of a place which he knew he wanted his wife, okay? And had all been choreographed. So Tom Butime says, I'm not going to Karamoja. I'm not interested in going to Karamoja. So now that was the excuse all through. How do you appoint your wife as minister? I appointed other people and they, you know, turned the job down. But had been choreographed. Butime was appointed to turn down the job. So that Museveni looks like, okay, I had nobody else to appoint apart from my wife. And then also on the time that she was supposed to appear before the vetting committee in Parliament, if you remember, on that list there was also Kakoza Mutale. So it was a question of who is more ridiculous, you know, between the president's wife and Kakoza Mutale. So now, because usually those vetting committee try to at least jump on one person, to have one over the president. So it turns out the first, so most of them said, okay, at least we'll jump on Kakoza Mutale. He's you know, all this reputation and so on. So as soon as the First Lady went through the vetting, Kakoza Mutale says, I'm not interested in the ministry. I've decided I'm too old, I should go and do what. So but yet the First Lady had gone through. Now the person whom they were waiting for and they kind of let her sail through, and they say, at least let's jump on this one. Then the one says, I'm not interested. So, and also, the beginning of the problem was when a president appoints his wife as minister. That is a big, big problem. And that was...
Isn't she qualified? Isn't she Ugandan?
Qualified.
She was an MP.
Okay, you ask your questions, but that was the beginning of the problem.
Okay.
Because
okay.
Everybody knows how the whole education was fast-tracked. Now I'm told she has a master's in education. I don't know where she has done teaching practice. I want to see a student who has been taught by the first lady, because you have to have a teaching practice,
yes.
Okay,
yes.
To have a master's education or something like that. I want to see where she taught, okay, to get that. So there are so many things that are abnormal, as I said, but the problem was the very beginning when we as a country allowed the president to get away with something like that. Now, when she's summoning parliament, and it's not just even the summon of come and we talk about, no, it is the, I have finally agreed to meet you, go for a COVID test and come, you know. First of all, the parliamentarians don't go for COVID test every time they are going into parliament. Okay, that's the one thing, because I think they observe certain rules and so on. But now that they are going to meet the first lady,
they're meeting the Minister of Education.
That's what you think. Now that they are going to meet the first lady, first go and they test you, you know, and then after testing you, I was going to give an example, but maybe it is not going to be so palatable. But you know, the whole idea of now I've agreed to meet you, go and they test you, then if you qualify, come and we meet for the open. Now the thing is, of course, she's the whole Minister of Education thing is she really is doing that because she's the first lady. And she knows she'll get away with it. That's the sad part. The sad part is, in spite of the pleas of people like Sebu Jungan and all the rest, she will get away with it. She will meet the MPs, they will discuss. They will go for the COVID test and come and meet her, and they will discuss. And some, of course, will stay away, thankfully. But I wish for once there would be one unified stand to tell that family that they do not own this country. It is in moments like this that we have to actually remind them, because in their mind they actually own the country and we are just squatters in this country. That's why they can do that. So now we need, at least I wish for once even NRM MPs would be unified for once and say no, we are not going to do that. So okay, it might not amount to too much ultimately, but at least you remind somebody that there are certain laws, there are certain procedures that have to be followed. Just because you're the wife of the president doesn't give you all those far-reaching powers. Then nobody wants Minister Kaigeva Karamoja because nobody wants it. Then the next thing, she's in charge of the minister which has the most amount of money. And all that is all, apart from, of course, defense, which is also somebody else in charge who is, you know. So you see the whole, it's just a family tree at the top of the country, and everybody else is just given some place to stand and basically hold on to a branch and survive.
Thank you.
And that's where the problem is.
Thank you, Mr. Kabuleta. I'll be coming back to you. Mr. Napito, the Speaker seems to say this does not in any way affect the sanctity of Parliament. And the discussion here is, in the Parliament meeting, if the meeting ever gets to happen, is there any rule that is being, you know, taken aback? Is it undermining Parliament's power as it is? Because you asked anyway, does the Parliament get to supervise her at the end of the day? Because the end game is discuss education, because this is the biggest question in the country right now.
Yeah, Mildred, all politics is generally about ego. And I think the egos of the MPs are being rubbed the wrong way by the minister. But of course, the sky would not fall if they went to Kololo. I know money has been cited, but the president and the first lady, I don't think anybody questions expenditure relating to them. So of course, historical politics is typical politics. There is always controversy. There is debate about everything. But I think in reality, as I said, if MPs have gone to meet the president in Kololo, or summoned them to Kololo, it doesn't make any difference if they went to listen to the first lady. And that's, I think, where the challenge is. The country has given the first lady and the president equal powers. And I think it's only natural. In any home, the wives are even more powerful than the husbands. So if you are workers or you are depending on the husband, his wife is equally powerful. She can even get you sacked. So look, in a country where we have clearly crowned the president as a father of the nation.
As a king.
His wife is the mother of the nation. And this, you can't blame them. The people get the leaders they deserve. Okay. There are countries where presidents and their wives are so powerless in front of the citizenry. Ours, we have chosen that mode. And if it's a matter of not wasting more debate, I say go to Kololo or don't go to Kololo.
Choose as you wish.
Yeah. So
all right, Alex, are we saying, Parliament seems to say we're setting a precedent here where we'll get to have ministers inviting Parliament on semi-parliamentary sittings to discuss business. That should be in Parliament. Would that be a fear that Parliament is looking at in a time when the country is saying this is one issue that we need to set, and Parliament is saying first, let's get to understand what the Ministry of Education has?
No, Parliament, it is obvious that Parliament would be setting a wrong precedent. If they get summoned to meet somebody, then they are supposed to supervise, and they cow down. I tend to agree more with the Kabuleta, normally having very, very sharp views. For once, we expect a certain kind of what they call leadership in Parliament. Even I am absolutely disappointed that the Speaker has failed to protect the sanctity of Parliament in this, and he seems to say that, oh, this is okay, and the MPs can go and meet the minister as she wishes. But I think Parliament should stand up and show leadership and summon the minister and the minister meets the MPs in Parliament, because if they go now to meet her as she wishes, then they would have set a very, very wrong precedent and would have undermined the sanctity and powers of Parliament to supervise these ministries. Okay. But of course the problem is that it was always wrong that the First Lady then is also appointed the minister, and the chickens have come home to roost.
Mr. Kabuleta, there are quite a number of issues the Parliament is raising on the floor. Number one, that the Speaker had said you cannot be invited by a minister, or you can not be invited as a Parliament by another person not on the floor and get to go. But also, he seems to say there is no problem with the sanctity of Parliament. This does not take away your role as a Parliament if you go to meet the minister. And that is why he is saying if you want to go. If you do not want, don't go at the end of the day. Are we setting any precedents anyway? Because we are discussing matters of national importance still.
The issue does, you really bring it down to the simplicity of it if you say we are discussing. Of course, we have to open schools and would want for them to meet and they open schools. But the truth is...
Or are we using that as a bait?
No, the thing is, politics has a lot of posturing, okay, and about statements made, where one president meets the other, and so on. Now, I'll give you an example that you remember in 1962, the Ben Chiwanuka situation of when Obote went and said that Ben Chiwanuka said he summoned the Kabaka to his office, and that probably cost Ben Chiwanuka an election. Because they were going to say, what? How do you summon the Kabaka? Now, actually, even Ben Chiwanuka went to court and accusing Obote of defamation. And it was thrown out because that one, spoiled his reputation among right-thinking, among Baganda loyalists, okay? And that's where they got the whole thing of right-thinking members of society generally. So, but Obote knew why he was saying it, because eventually it is his alliance with Kabaka Yeka which, led him to be the first executive prime minister of Uganda. But him saying that he summoned the Kabaka, okay? Now, that cost, even if actually Ben Chiwanuka says he did not do it, but Obote is saying that Ben Chiwanuka said he summoned the Kabaka, now that put him in a certain position. Now, the whole thing of who summons who. Now, much later on, when Trump was the president of America, and there was this trade wars with China, and he wanted to make a statement, where is he meeting the Chinese president? So Trump tells the Chinese president, because of course America had a lot of, he tells the Chinese president that if you are going to discuss trade, you are going to come to America, and then he took him to Mar-a-Lago, his private resort in Florida, just to make a statement that I am the president of the biggest economy in the world, I am at least $7 trillion ahead of you. So if we are talking trade, you will meet me on my terms. Now that in itself is, you know, a statement. So all these things are about statements. Now when a minister who is an ex-official in parliament and actually should, I mean, attend some of these whatever sittings now, and of course doesn't attend, and of course you're excused from that because you're first lady. Maybe you have more important things doing, looking after the president and so on. But if she now sits and says, go, all of you go and get tested and then come and meet me, now there is everything wrong with that. There is no way you can dress it. You cannot dress it up in any way.
Is the problem testing to meet? Is
no,
the
problem is the whole series of everything and the way it is done. Oh, you know what the problem is, Mildred. Don't stop asking questions which, you know, the whole thing is the manner in which she summoned them. Okay? First of all, even if it was the president who is the head of the executive, the judiciary is an arm of government. Even he would have to apply a bit of, you know, tact in the way he wants to meet the parliament, even if he's, you know, head of the other arm of government. You don't just do it so brazenly like that, as if you're calling for, as if it's a headmaster calling for school children. That's not how it is. You cannot dress it up in every way. It was ugly from the moment I saw it. I said, let me see how these MPs are going to respond to a situation like that. It was terrible. And it was ugly, and I wish, of course I'm not so hopeful, but I wish for once they could stand up and, you know, retain the sanctity of parliament and stand up to these people and tell them that you cannot belittle us like this.
Okay.
We are elected officials. She is not, okay? She's appointed. These are elected people. These are people who are representing, you know, the citizens of Uganda. So they have earned their place there through, you know, a rigorous election. So at least show them some respect. So you can dress it up anyway. Unfortunately, some will go as a speaker and say, those who want to go will
go.
Those who do not. Okay, that was a very lame statement. And okay, it was very unfortunate coming from him, and I'll just leave it at that.
Because he anyway supported it by saying it doesn't affect the sanctity of parliament. So that's the reason he's saying you go if you want to go, you don't go if you don't want to go.
It does. It does affect the sanctity and powers of parliament. For a person that you supervise to want to meet you at her own terms, it really does affect the sanctity and the powers of parliament. Okay. We cannot, I agree with Joseph here, there is no way you can dress it. It is
just open, it's naked, it's out there.
It is terrible, it is terrible. I think the parliament should be able to exercise their powers, and those who then are in position to be able to deal with parliament, we expect them to exercise some level of decency and allow Parliament to do their work.
But just before we take a break, in about a minute or two for each one of us, just in case this meeting does get to happen, how then would Parliament be able to address the resolutions or whatever has been discussed in there? Do you see that possibility? For example, I'll start off with you, Mr. Napito. How possible would this be? If the meeting happens, the discussions have gone on, probably the speaker attended, how do we get back this business from a semi-parliamentary sitting to a main parliamentary sitting?
I think the speaker and his deputy are pretty smart the way they have been interpreting the law. So I'm sure there will be a way it will be interpreted to have the force of a meeting of parliament or of a minister briefing parliament. So it will still.
Well, we've not had the minister.
But I think also the minister more wants to talk about, if she's going to talk about the reopening, then it doesn't necessarily have to have parliamentary authority for the schools to reopen. It's more about briefing them and maybe as leaders. So I don't think it's a legislative decision per se.
It's as dicey as it is because, well, yes, the country awaits the reopening, but also now waits. Well, after the postponement, are we going to have another date communicated where the Minister of Education and First Lady will be meeting the Parliament in a semi-parliamentary meeting where you, and in this case, you attend if you want to, you don't attend if you don't want to. But well, we continue with many other.
And you don't attend at your own risk.
No, you didn't say you don't attend at your own. Where was the risk?
First of all, I think to solve the impasse, because the reality is the meeting is going to take place, but solve the impasse, why doesn't she just send one of the junior or the other ministers of Education,
the state ministers.
State ministers, to go and meet Parliament and brief them on what she wanted to brief them. Okay? Other ministers who are not first ladies, who do not come with that baggage of being the wife of the president. So just send another minister. She's not the only minister.
That would be a very good middle ground.
Yeah, because the whole place, because I know eventually, because Olanya owes his place there to Museveni, privately. Okay? The whole speaker thing, you know what happened there. And I mean, all these are, the parliament is headed by NRM and so on. So, and now, NRM equals first family, one way or the other. So the reality is, the only way the impasse can be solved, I think, where the sanctity of parliament is respected and the royalty of these people who crown themselves the royal family is also respected. And I mean, I'm saying that sarcastically, is if she sends a non-royal, like the Minister of State of Education, or higher education, or maybe to just come and brief Parliament about it in Parliament without necessitating MPs to go for COVID tests as if they are going to meet, I don't know.
Okay.
And then we solve the problem.
So are you saying if the Queen invited Parliament to Buckingham Palace, they should refuse?
She cannot. The Queen comes and addresses the British House in the British House.
This discussion continues. We are waiting to see what precedent is going to be set, especially after that postponed date is communicated finally. But definitely, yes, we have to have a discussion about reopening of schools. How it is done is the discussion that comes to at a later stage. We'll take a short break and return with much more of what happened through the week.
I came out and said that the first thing the president should do when he speaks to a nation today is first remove all COVID restrictions. Because poverty is a bedrock for all sorts of things. Idleness and poverty. And idle mind is the auction for the devil, they say. And poverty. When people become desperate, there is no limit to what they can do. So now look at what's happening in the city. You said there are certain things which Honorable Jim Mweze might not understand, especially him, especially now that he's back on the, on the round table and out of purgatory. But the honest truth is, small things. What happened to all the bouncers and what were involved in the night economy? You see, when you look in this city, I know that because I interact with people. Somebody has a border. He works by day and gives it to somebody by night. And they use the same bike to feed two families. One working in the days, one working in the night. You wouldn't know that. It's none of you. But now you put a useless and senseless and mindless curfew for what? What is that serving? Now that means the other man who was working in the night has nothing to do. That means all the people who are involved in the night economy have nothing to do. There are certain conditions which are birthed by political scenarios. Number one, are political and economic scenarios. And a lot of terrorism is birthed in that sort of thing. So why don't we first deal with the poverty situation? Because I know these things like tribalism and all those arise out of, at the heart of it all is because when you start doing a business, now like I was recently in Bukedi, and there's all this issue between the Bateso and the dollar and all that. I don't know this is poverty, because when you start doing serious business and you're linking up, the tribe does not matter. If you're a wholesaler, you don't care about, because the minute your pockets start growing bigger, there are certain things that cease to matter completely. There was an offensive here by the Ugandan security forces that went and appeared to crush a lot of, ADF that time. Now there are some fighters who left and went and did their thing somehow in Congo and went about their life. But the others who were brought to Kampala, actually, many of them went through the Amnesty Commission and got amnesty certificates. Including Jamil Mukulu's son, who in 2013 got amnesty and returned. Yeah. Yasin. Now, the thing about that is when they came here, they were given promises. They were disarmed. They were, taken away from their from their terrorist habitat. But they were not resettled, and they were promised some things. And the reality is, and I've been hearing this from all sorts of sources, that there was a lot of disappointment in what they expected in regard to money and what didn't come. And then they have, the only training they have is to kill. So now if you get them and give them amnesty and keep them roaming in the streets of Kampala without putting them somewhere, they are going to revert back to what they know, because it's all they know. Uganda njagala okulaba ye Uganda eina okusokera ddala eina obukulembeze obufa ku bantu, obufa ku mbeera z'abantu. obutalinga buno obukulembeze bwe tulina kati. Kuba kati bw'otunuulira Uganda abantu abasinga baali balina engeri gye balowoolezaamu gavumenti nti eyinza obbayamba, bwe balanga gavumenti ejja bayamba. Kati osanga abantu abamu nga n'eggwanga lyabwe batandise oddikyawa, batandise oddyogerera olala. Kati bw'ogendako mu mawanga amalala olaba abantu balina eggwanga lyabwe balyagala, boogera bulungi ku ggwanga lyabwe. Naye kizibu nnyo okusaba because kiva mu bukulembeze. Kati obukulembeze obwagaliza abantu obusobola okuyamba abantu okubaako ne bye bakola naddala mbyenfuna kubanga nze awo wensinga okuteeka essira. Abantu ng'oliwo abazze ng'alina kyayagala okwekolerawo ekisobola omujjayo abeeko ne byafuna nga amanyi gavumenti emukwatirako so si kulinda bulinzi nti akatandika bajje n'omusolo tebafuddeeyo. Leeta omusolo tebafuddeeyo ow'omwaka ogudda banajja okumusaba omusolo nga waali ekyo tebakifaako oba bizinesi efuddaawo wennyini nga bo kibafa ku kyabwe kyokka kwegamba ne babanga abakama ente gye batawa muddo kwegamba
namazzi kunywa. Kati twagala okulaba Uganda nti abantu bano bojjako bino ebintu, abantu bano bwe muyimiriddeko bo bayimiriddewo batya, b'embeera yaabwe eri etya, bo ebintu bye bakola bitambula bitya. Olidde kakati biki bye baali badde baagala okulaba abantu ba Uganda biki bibalowooleza eggwanga lyabwe. Kisookera ddala beeyagalira mu ggwanga lyabwe okusinga.
The Minority Report on the supplementary schedule for the financial year 2021-2022 indicates that government intends to spend at least 24 billion shillings on purchase of vehicles for the different ministries and government departments. 8.3 billion shillings is to cater for vehicles for presidential advisors that include Dr. Hakana Rugunda, former Vice President Edward Kiwanuka Sekandi and Amelia Chambade, while 1.225 billion will be used to purchase 2 vehicles for Ministers Hanifa Kawoya Manjirana and Margaret Muhanga. At least 2.8 billion is budgeted to cater for cars in the Ministry of Trade, including Francis Mwebesa, Henry Ntabazi, Frederick Ngobi Gume, David Bahati and the Permanent Secretary Geraldine Sali. Among others to benefit from the purchases is the first Deputy Prime Minister Rebecca Altwala Kadaga and her Deputy Ikoyi Magodi. At least 1.2 billion will be used for this purchase. Reports have indicated before that some of the ministers have deliberately refused to take up cars used by their predecessors even when they're in a good condition. 10 billion shillings will be used by the Internal Security Organization ISO to buy vehicles. The Minority Report has referred to these requests as avoidable. But what policy does the government follow to procure new cars for its technical and political leadership? Former Minister Captain Francis Babu says the practice is that each 5 years that government changes, new vehicles are purchased.
Most cars, they say between 3 and...
All right, looking at government priorities, especially 4 months into a new financial year, and we have a 3.8 trillion supplementary budget that's needed, and a huge percentage of that, or at least a particular percentage of that money, is going into fleet purchase. The country is asking, where are our priorities? 4 months into the new financial year, I'll start off with you, Mr. Joseph Kabuleta. This means that these ministers that we are planning cars for have definitely been traveling. The question is, how have they been traveling on the other hand? And is it priority now in COVID-19? We have a doctor's strike that is going on, and so many other list of priorities. Would we be looking first hand at, for example, using 1.2 billion to buy cars for 2 people in a particular ministry?
First of all, you have to look at the way this country is structured is that when it comes to, there is the whole pyramid of things. Now, when it comes to the people at the top, money is always available to do everything that they want, regardless of how much. Now, at the bottom, we are actually, at the top, if you start from ministers and heads of the government departments or upwards, we're actually a first world country. We are way up there with some of the first world countries in terms of how much we spend, okay, and even how much our officials are lavished in government expenditure. Our third worldness only starts from below, from there going downwards. Now go down when it comes to getting salaries for teachers, for salaries for promises made by the president to doctors, from 2017 onwards, and all the consequent meetings that have happened and so on. That's where there is no money. But when it is for up there is always money. There's always money, because we had a supplementary budget of 600 billion, less than 1 week, actually, to be precise, 1 week into July, when the new budget had just started. 1 week into July, we already had the supplementary budget. And they were saying it is for COVID. Now, COVID, of course, we can say so many things, because it can fit into the bracket of okay, of course it wasn't, and we know it wasn't even used for that, but it can fit into an emergency, or maybe there is an emergency right now, maybe there is another way, whatever. At least it can be explained. As stupid as those explanations will be, at least it can be explained. But now, what is emergency about buying cars for people who have been there already? I mean, because supplementary budgets... The
ministers need to be comfortable to be
supplementary
able to
budgets are supposed to be... Then if they are supposed to become... Let them put it in the budget. The way the MPs' cars were in the budget, and we could not complain because it had been budgeted by the 10th Parliament. Okay? And these MPs just found it there. So it was in the budget. So you could not complain regardless of how much those cars cost, because actually a good percentage of the MPs who passed that budget did not even come back to this current budget. Maybe they thought they would, but they didn't. But now, what is... Because supplementary is supposed to be about something emergency, something we didn't foresee. Let's say if there is some, like they have used COVID as the excuse and so on. You could say, of course, it's all lies and so on, but at least you can explain that somehow. But now, what is supplementary about buying cars, 1.2 billion for 2 cars? That is 600 million each car. What is emergency about buying cars for people like Ruakana Rugunda, people like Abama Mbabazi, who, of course, we know have been okay? And regardless of what it is we might want to give them in form of entitlements and so on, not in a supplementary budget. At least, okay, it's bad enough that you budget for it, but it is 10 times worse if you bring it as a supplementary. But of course, we know a lot of this money is going to be used for so many things. But the truth is, maybe we should just give up as a country budgeting. Just forget budgeting. Let's just eat the money. Because if you have...
Well, it's the money in this
the people who have been eating it. Because if you have a supplementary 1 week into July, when the budget has just rolled out, before even the ink has dried out, you already have a supplementary. It's like taking your kid to school, and these ones are behaving like kids. It's like taking your kid to school and then you give him pocket money until visiting Sunday, which is maybe a month and a half, and the next day, the guy calls you and says, I'm broke. Okay? The very next day. Now, this is, why don't we just give up on budgeting and just say, bring money, and or maybe we limit the budget to where we are going to get money, how we are going to squeeze the very shrinking middle class for extra coins here and there, to go and inflate the stomachs of the people at the top. And then we limit the budget to that. Spending, leave it to us. Because we had a scenario, for instance, where Parliament goes and tells a minister, an acting minister, come and account for 31 billion, which you took for a specific purpose. And we have not seen that purpose being accomplished. Come and budget for it. Just that simple. Tell us what you did with the money. And then the president himself comes and says, don't touch her. She's a top scientist. What has that got to do with money? Okay, a scientist allowed to be thieves. That's, presuming she stole the money, because unless she accounts for it, the presumption is that she did. So now, what kind of country are we? So why don't we just say all money all belongs to the president? So just collect budgets about where we are going to increase taxes on this, on people's B and what, so that we get money. Now, when we bring it in the pool, please do not tell us how to use it, because we cannot have supplementary budgets at the rate at which we have it them for things which are totally non-emergency.
All right. I will be coming back to you. Alex.
Yes.
We need to have comfort to ease service delivery. I'm trying to think about it in that manner. Even right after, the appointment of ministers, there are some ministers who say they wouldn't be driving particular cars that their predecessors actually used. Where is the problem when we have a supplementary budget to be able to cater for their money? It's budgeting after all, anyway.
I think it is right. It's a very big problem. Government fleet management has always been a grey area of wasteful expenditure. And it is obviously a problem that you are asking for a supplementary budget and then allocating all those billions on fleet acquisition Now, the thought process of our budgeting in these COVID times should be that actually things are very tight, and we should only be spending money on things that are top priority, and I don't think fleet acquisition. Because the government everywhere, in all sectors, in all departments, have enough fleets to see officials through to the next round of budgeting. I don't think that fleet acquisition is a very, very urgent priority, and but the problem is our thought process into this budgeting, and I tend to agree again with Joseph Kabuleta that we are abusing the budgeting process. Year in, year out, and the problem is the way we are structured. We are not, we do not, when you look at the resource envelope actually, in our budgeting cycle is that we don't invest in areas that are priority, because the biggest priorities for these economies, for this economy in Uganda should be, for example, the money you are committing to sectors like agriculture, the money you are committing to sectors like tourism. But as you know, in our budgeting cycle and our budgeting process, those are not exactly very key priorities. So my sense of this supplementary budget is that there is a lot of wasteful expenditure that is being planned for, and it should be addressed.
Ona, Ugandans have always sulked. Every time we are talking about, for example, money for cars, even when it came for members of parliament, even when it had been, budgeted for, they said, no, at least not this time. You cannot be taking over 300 million to just go and buy cars. Now here, government is saying these ministers need to deliver services that are expected of them, but they need comfort. They need to be able to travel at the end of the day. What's the problem with the supplementary budget?
You know, Ugandans and their cars, right from the village, if they see a new car, is a big story. And it's actually sad that it speaks a lot about our situation as a country, or generally part of the world, that we are still debating cars, In some parts of the world, owning a car is a burden, because they are much better means of transport, much efficient, much cheaper. But because we have a dysfunctional public transport system, everyone is only thinking about a car. There is no speed train, there are no domestic commercial flights, there are no personal helicopters for many people, or private helicopters. So a car has become a symbol of success, a symbol of entitlement, and when people believe someone has eaten in the government, gotten a big job, they associate you with having a big car. So again, we have been talking about Kololo and all this. This is playing to the expectations of Ugandans. All the people whom they are saying need cars actually have cars, But because it's a belief that you must get a new car if you get a big position in government, it doesn't matter whether you have your own new car, you must be given a car. So I don't know. The debate is almost, in Uganda, if you don't want to get a heart attack thinking about government things, then don't think about it. You just get a heart attack.
We will need to think, because at the end of the day, you are paying taxes, right?
I pay taxes. I'm actually one of the biggest taxpayers. If I said the amount I've paid in taxes, I should be given, I don't know what medal.
A brand new car.
No, private helicopter.
Gentlemen.
No, but let me try to address your fears. I think the ministry, I've spoken sample, the Minister of Finance. Supplementary is actually a big haste,
That's what
it's one of those mysteries to even Parliament, but there are few people who understand supplementary, and it's going to be there because it gives people a chance to make a lot of money. Not just the beneficiaries of the money who are publicly paraded, but even the guys who are working in the numbers. Most of these prices are definitely inflated. They are being told for the cars. I'm sure most of those cars may be 200 less or 150 million less than the price that is appearing in the parliamentary debate. But the question is, this is the government we have.
Okay.
Yeah, but
Even if you went, I'm not resigned from here. I'm a realist. I don't want to be to criticize what even Kabuleta. I know that's why you perhaps you lost the presidential election.
Why?
Because you told people these things and they don't give you the votes.
What did they give? Did
They want those. They gave those.
Let me say this.
Gentlemen,
Let me say this.
yes.
You know, the whole card debate, because even when we had, when there was a serious that time issue, remember when we were in March, around March, April, May 2020, when the COVID thing had just come and, you know.
And then we approved the money for cars for
Forget
parliamentarians.
number one, but then also, no, forget about the cars for parliamentarians. I had no issue with them because it was budgeted. Now, when the money which was collected, remember, by different people and so on.
The donations.
Yeah, the donations. And the money is used to buy a fleet of cars, apart the COVID. Then the cars are given to RDCs, apart the COVID. Then you know that COVID is just, I mean, the whole thing is about, of course, we know the work RDCs do. They are spies, they are, you know, executioners and so on. So it is all about regime survival and the economy of cars. But you know, when you talk cars in Uganda, when you try transferring this debate from one country to another, let's say to Kenya, and tell them that we are taking a supplementary budget to buy cars for presidential advisors, and just see how they think. Because, you know, sometimes we get so locked up in our Ugandan way of thinking that we actually don't want to consider what other people are thinking elsewhere. I remember there was a story, a big story of former Prime Minister of Italy. He was Prime Minister at the time, Silvio Berlusconi, and how he had these parties which were called bunga bunga, and they would bring very young girls, sometimes even underage. The man was 70, but you know, there were 20, 19-year-old girls and so on. And so the British media picked up on it, and there were pictures of, you know, Berlusconi and so on, and they blew it up as a very big scandal. There was this scandal where the Italian Prime Minister is, you know, having all these call girls and so on. And so it blew, you know, it was a scandal in the UK. Now, what amused me is when it came to Italy, where the man supposedly committed the crime, and they asked a gentleman that, what do you think about your Prime Minister? You know, sleeping with very young girls. The man said, now this is how the man said that, I think it's good for the Prime Minister to have as much sex as possible so that he makes the best decisions for our country. Now the scandal died when you crossed from the UK to Italy, because for them they had normalized it. It's okay, let him have as much sex as possible because it helps him make the best decisions in the mind of the Italians. Now, so you transfer the way we've normalized things which are so abnormal, and we've made them look normal. Like, you're passing supplementary budgets to buy cars. And for people who have been serving for 20 and so years, who are not necessarily
same docket.
That's not necessarily new appointees. If you are given an office and you do not want the car of your predecessor, buy your own.
And that is where I'm bringing the discussion as
we can even give them the liberty to sell that one since you don't want it.
Sell it, top up,
buy what you want.
And that's where my discussion was coming. Alex, I want to start with you before we take a break. The fleet management in government has always been the problem. From inception, we would say procurement, to even disposal. How we get to dispose of cars. There's so many cars that are parked outside ministry departments and agencies, and they haven't probably been disposed of, and probably by the time they're disposed of, they're of less value than they would. What would you suggest would be a better fleet management system that would be cost effective for a country like Uganda?
I think the ministry, is it public service that is in charge of that, of coming up with a policy on these things? Because, you know, I saw somebody saying that the policy in government now is every 5 years, they are supposed to replace the fleet or something like that. But we need a very, very clear policy on how fleet is managed in terms of acquisition, in terms of management. I think the biggest problem when you come up, when you talk about actually the value at disposal is even the way it is managed. You find, you go to a ministry like Ministry of Health there, it is by the roadside. I see so many cars parked and dumped in the parking yard of the ministry. Why is that so? So I think there is need for the public service, which is in charge of these things, to come up with a clear policy of government acquisition of fleet, management and disposal. And then what I wanted to say is that some of these officials that they are going to buy new fleet for, like the vice president, former prime minister, remember that they have retired with some of these vehicles that were attached to their departments, to themselves, and now you are going to actually add them a second vehicle. So I was saying that in terms of the details of that supplementary budget, I think fleet acquisition is not the most urgent issue.
And I just wanted to help you on the issue of management. Fortunately, I was in government and I'm now in the private sector. I think one of the biggest challenges with government cars is, of course, it's all down to corruption in terms of as well acquisition. You know, the procurement system is often corrupted, and people get inflated prices for cars that should be cheaper. But then the bigger issue is maintenance of cars. Actually, there are two ways in which a car should be regarded ready for replacement, either just the number of years on the road or the mileage. Some cars travel longer mileages. But the management of cars, regular service does not take place in most of the government departments, or even if it's provided for, because of corruption, they take these cars and they are purported to have been maintained or serviced when they have not been serviced. So you can have a car which is fairly shiny on the outside, but the engine is already ruined. So most of the cars we say are parked, looking new, the engines have gotten ruined due to poor service maintenance. And there are even extreme cases where, where it's alleged that some government cars, the engines have been switched.
Yeah.
They have been taken to some garages, the good engine has been removed and an old engine has been put in due to the corrupt practice of some of the drivers and the people who run the transport section. So until when you're able to get to grips with those basic elements of corruption, you're always going to have a crisis in government transport system. Okay. Of course, there is the alternative that the private sector does very well of car allowance. Instead of giving people cars, give them money to run their own cars, especially maybe the people who have retired and have their own cars. The best thing for them would be car allowance. Okay. They are just paid money to run their own cars, and then you don't have to go into the hassle of buying cars, failing to maintain them, and then having a lot of rotten cars parked around.
How do we better manage our fleet as a country? What would be some of the options as we go?
We have to remember that one of the first supplementary budgets that was passed was 10 billion to buy a new fleet of cars for the president. And his cars haven't been in use for too long, the ones which they were replacing. He said he needed a whole new replacement of cars. So everything you see, like the whole thing, fish rots from the head. Everything you see, when the person at the top does something, the people down there are going to want to do it. When the president moves with a fleet of 40 cars, you find even simple ministers wanting 3 or 4 cars of lead cars and following car, and it's totally not necessary. There's nowhere else in the world where people, you find every judge wants this, every what, all sorts of people, because the other man has gone 40. Now you think that by the laws of natural justice, maybe I, as a junior minister, 2 or 3 would be good. Then the next thing, everybody has a fleet of cars. Now there are sirens all over the city. Kampala is a siren city. Every minute there is a siren taking somebody. Every top army commander, every judge, every minister, every head of everybody wants a fleet. So it all starts from there. Now, the first supplementary budget that was requested was 10 billion to buy a new fleet of cars for the president. Now, the minute that is passed, then a precedent has been set for the entire year because now cars are going to be, everybody will start thinking, President 10 billion, for us 500 million, that's good. And in his mind, it's only fair, because I mean, okay, 600 million, to 1.2 billion for 2 cars. So 10 billion for the president, okay, for us 600 million, that's good. But the 10 billion wasn't necessary, neither is your 600 million. And the whole culture, first of all, as Una was saying, of maintenance, is we are making new roads as old ones are dying because of lack of maintenance. We do not have a culture of maintenance in this country, pure and simple. Everything that is that, you know, they will put up brilliant street lights. There were all these street lights which were put up by, you know, the Jennifer Musi regime and so on. Go and see how many of them are functioning right now. And they just need, some of them might need simple things like replacing the, you know, the cells for the solar and so on. But the culture of maintenance is not there.
It's poor.
It starts, you know, a pothole starts very small and it can be filled. And actually, minimum damage caused to the road. But no, they'll wait for it to grow bigger and bigger and bigger. Now, eventually, by the time they get to filling it, first of all, there will be a different company which is supposed to come and cut the road at the side, and then it takes another a month or 2 before the company that is supposed to come and fill gets the money to come and fill up the cut. So the whole culture of maintenance is so poor. That's why the government needs to be replacing cars which actually have been on the road for a very short time and have very small mileage.
Well, we'll take this to our viewers as we take a break. How do you think government can better fleet management? Do we buy cars and maintain them? Do we give people money and they buy cars and maintain them for themselves? And how do we deal with the maintenance, the servicing and all that? Because that's another gray area where the government is losing a lot of money that you and I pay in terms of taxes. We'll be taking a very short break, and when we do return, yes, the NSSF bill is passed. What does it mean exactly? It's going to benefit just about 93,000 people who are eligible for the clauses that were put in place. So does it count? How do we build a saving culture? Because that seems to be the bigger issue. That and much more when we do return.
I know that our politics has been guided so much by personalities, and we want to move away from personalities and move into ideology. That is our purpose. So what is the one ideology that we selected? We sat as a group and selected one thing that is urgent to this country, and that is the idea of economic empowerment. Because the one thing that has been taken away from our people is their financial dignity. They have been stripped, they have been turned into beggars, they have been turned into everything, you know, government help us, government help us. Yet in actual sense, many of these people have the abilities to go and do something for themselves if they were just given a little support. But then it's important to know that the people who have held us captive for more than 3.5 decades have the means to control the wealth of this country. But they do not have the means to control our conversation. And there is no meaningful change that comes unless we change what we are talking about. And I've told the people here these days that whoever rules the narrative actually owns the whole thing. So apart from actually controlling wealth, they have to keep the public fed with a certain narrative of, you know, giving them talking points, and then you talk about things, and it's a major, major thing in this country. Even for all TVs I go to and so on, they are making you discuss very insignificant things while all the resources of the country are being taken. Every single war in the world right now is about one thing and one thing, resources. And everything you hear, people who are being cut with Bijambi and what, let me tell you, it's about resources. One thing only, resources. So we have to start talking about the elephant in the room, which is resources, the resources of this country. Why do some people believe that they have almost a divine right to own every wealth in this country while they treat the rest of the people as squatters in our own country? Now, we might not be able to change the politics unless we actually start changing the conversation. Now, I'm tasking these people here from all their regions to go to their regions, and we as a team will be visiting all these 17 regions one after the other to get people to talk about, do you know what is in this land of yours? You are from Bukedi. Do you know how many minerals are here? Do you know what you can do for yourselves from this region? Do you know how much wealth is deposited in this place? Or are you just talking about things which somebody is stealing your wealth and giving you talking points which have no bearing on improving your lifestyle? So we want to task all these people to go and change the conversation in their place and create an ideology that is going to guide the next political dispensation. Because I've seen all the organizations of people trying to guide the next political dispensation, and all of them are built around one thing and one thing only: personalities. None about ideology. And we have to move away from that. Because if we stay on the issue of personalities, there is no guarantee that we will not replace Museveni with another Museveni. Unless the electorate is actually enlightened about what it is they are fighting for. We do not want an electorate to fight for anybody. We want them to fight for themselves. We are telling them that when you stand up to fight with us, the National Economic Empowerment Dialogue, you're fighting for yourself, not for any personality.
Uganda njagala okulaba ye Uganda eina okusokera ddala eina obukulembeze obufa ku bantu, obufa ku mbeera z'abantu, obutalinga buno obukulembeze bwe tulina kati. Kuba kati bw'otunuulira Uganda, abantu abasinga baali balina engeri gye balowoolezaamu gavumenti nti eyinza obbayamba, bwe balanga gavumenti ejja bayamba. Kati osanga abantu abamu nga n'eggwanga lyabwe batandise oddikyawa, batandise oddyogerera olala. Kati bw'ogendako mu mawanga amalala olaba abantu balina eggwanga lyabwe balyagala, boogera bulungi ku ggwanga lyabwe. Naye kizibu nnyo okusaba because kiva mu bukulembeze. Kati obukulembeze obwagaliza abantu, obusobola okuyamba abantu okubaako ne bye bakola, naddala mu byenfuna, kubanga nze awo wensinga okuteeka essira. Abantu ng'oli abazze ng'alina kyayagala okwekolerawo ekisobola omugjayo abeeko ne byafuna, nga amanyi gavumenti emukwatirako, so si kulinda bulinzi nti yakatandika bajje n'omusolo tebafuddeeyo, leeta omusolo tebafuddeeyo ow'omwaka ogudda banajja okumusaba omusolo nga waali ekyo tebakifaako, oba bizinesi efuddaawo wennyini nga bo kibafa ku kyabwe kyokka, kwegamba ne babanga abakama ente gye batawa muddo, kwegamba
namazzi kunywa. Kati twagala okulaba Uganda nti abantu bano bojjako bino ebintu, abantu bano bwe muyimiriddeko, bo bayimiriddewo batya, b'embeera yaabwe eri etya, bo ebintu bye bakola bitambula bitya, olidde. Kakati biki bye baali badde baagala okulaba abantu ba Uganda, biki bye balowooleza eggwanga lyabwe. Ekisookera ddala beeyagalira mu ggwanga lyabwe okusinga abagwira bwe beeyagalira mu Uganda. Ekyo so si bwe kiri. Uganda gye njagala okulaba ye Uganda nga bwe tuba tuleese omugwira baba bazze wano n'aleeta ssente. Ekisookera ddala alina okuba nga aleese ssente, so si kujja buzi mu Uganda kufuna ku ssente z'asanzeewo wano. Bw'aba aleese ssente, bannansi balina kye bazifunamu.
Welcome back. Thank you for keeping it NBS Television. We are proud that you wake up every morning to watch. This is the Media Roundtable, comes to you your way every Friday, where we get journalists in their perspective dissecting the issues that have happened during that particular week. And today, we are as well privileged to have a panel that is looking through. Well, we did expect earlier on to have Mr. Angelo Izama, but unfortunately, he couldn't make it to the show. I know there are quite a number of viewers who are asking, you promised that he was going to be coming, but he's not here. This very week as well, finally, once again, the Parliament passed the NSSF Amendment Bill, where it has allowed a number of, a number of things to be relaxed. For example, people who are who are 45 and above and have been saving for 45 years are entitled to, 10 years, I beg your pardon, they're entitled to about 20% of their money. As for the persons living with disabilities, you're 40 and have been saving, you can be able to get up to 50% of your money out. But also, voluntary saving is here. You can decide to go and open up an account and be able to save your money with the National Social Security Fund. Now, part of the clauses have vested the power of management of those specifics under the Ministry of Finance and others under the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development. So we ask this time, will the President be able to assent to the bill? For you, Mr. Onapito, what stands out for you particularly in this amendment bill? Because out of the 2 million savers who are saving about 1 trillion shillings each and every year, about 93,000 would be eligible to get this out of the new amendments created. Does it make an impact?
I think this has been one of the best things to come out of Parliament in a long time. It's a smart move. Of course, as you can imagine, people like me who have been around for a while.
You're warming up.
And I've been if Obore was here, I will tell you the right word in Ateso is ailikaimul, which is salivating. So people like me are salivating because we may get something.
But also probably
And
because
you better,
no employers
you
were
better start
saving.
talking to me nicely because you never know where you'll meet me. I will be looking different when you meet me next time.
Oh, no, we are not going to eat your life savings.
Okay, but does it
So,
make a
no,
huge impact anyway?
I think it makes
because, Honor,
it makes a big
research-
difference
Honor,
because
just a minute. Research from The Economist shows that a greater percentage of the savers actually do not have more than 10 million shillings there.
I know.
Probably. Because employers are either remitting less or even not remitting the employees' savings at the end of the day.
You're absolutely right, but also this is going to make a very big difference. You know, I'm actually chairing another entity which is similar to NSSF, and we experimented with the idea of
Midterm access.
midterm access, and it caused a lot of change. You know, for many years there has been doubt about whether things like NSSF are real or are not just a gimmick to take away people's money, and you don't get anything in the end, you struggle to get paid, or if you die, your dependents will never get anything. So this will actually help NSSF to market itself, to prove to people who are alive especially that you can actually get some of the money you have been seeing on your statement in reality. So I think the amounts will differ across the board, but money is money. You know, even if now you give me 10,000, 5,000, it's money. You know, it will help you do something. So people being able to get part of their money is going to be very motivating to even those who have not been saving. And remember, this debate has actually also demonstrated that there is no saving in the country. And government is the biggest culprit, you know, so much that it's now being accused of wanting to hold on to this money at the expense of the owners. And it's true because government doesn't also have its own money really stacked aside, and that's why it is heavily indebted, it's borrowing left and right. So the fact that people who are forced, for lack of a better word, over the years to save money are the only ones now who are holding a huge chunk of money through NSSF proves that saving money is the ultimate solution for many people. Because we are a country of hand-to-mouth living. Again, government is the biggest culprit. You have been seeing it just does not have capacity to hold money despite all the taxes collected. It's always living above its means. So to me, the bigger story is when now people see that those who are forced to save are having some money. Shouldn't this be now the time to also debate the question, how do you get the rest of Ugandans, poor or rich, to hold something for the rainy day, for themselves and for posterity? Maybe it would be a much better country if what we are seeing in NSSF was all embracing for both the employed in private and public, but even for the unemployed. So I hope NSSF will now ride on the excitement, and they should actually, without risking the lives of those who will get the money, maybe publish without names the people who have got paid out of this midterm, the kind of money people are getting, to excite others to also save.
All right, and that's where the bigger picture is. Alex, coming to you. The bigger picture for Uganda is the saving culture, which we've always termed as poor, but the question is people are living hand to mouth. Before I think about saving, I want to think about
And just correct you, it's not just hand to mouth. For many of us, it's hand to many mouths, the dependency crisis.
Exactly, and the question is, how do we then get to better production? How then do we get to have a better economy where employers can be able to give good salaries and also be able to make profits to pay off? Because an employer is paying 10%, I am paying 5%. Many of these are not remitting 15%.
Yeah, it comes back to the economy. You know, our economy is a bit small and limited when you talk about the better salaries and whatever. But when all this, I already save with NSSF, I already save with another voluntary saving scheme, the Mazima retirement saving scheme. But it is true that the saving culture in the country is very bad. One, because people do not trust these processes. If you want to invite people to save in a scheme like I'm on the Mazima social media accounts, and people are always asking a lot of questions. They are already saving, but they are not actually, they don't trust the process already. They are already voluntary saving in the scheme, but you can see the questions they ask. They are not very confident that their money is very safe. Now, then it comes back to this argument of mid-term access to the NSSF. When the process started, I was on the other side of the argument of, because the reasoning behind the pension scheme is that the money should be enjoyed in retirement. So I was with those then who argued that mid-term is a bad precedent. But as the process started and the arguments came out, I realized that actually the big issue is the confidence that the people and the savers, and these are forced savers, have in this system, that their money is not safe. And I agree with Onapito that it's now time for the likes of NSSF to demonstrate that this saver's money has been safe and it is there and you can access it without problems. And then maybe that can inspire a saving culture, whether forced or whether voluntary in the country, because as you say, it's really very bad. Our saving culture across the country is at very low levels.
Okay. Punishments for employers who do not pay their NSSF or do not remit, up to 20% charges there. But are we really looking at the bigger issue, coming to you, Mr. Kabuleta, the bigger issue of why people need part of money which is meant to be enjoyed in retirement, number one. Secondly, why those employers are not remitting these or are not even declaring that I have 5 or more, because 5 or more employees, you get to start paying your NSSF.
First of all, the word retirement is very loosely used in Uganda, because how many people lost their jobs, retired at the age of 35 because of this COVID thing, and all the harsh, the very harsh, conditions that were set by our government, which were, a lot of them were unnecessary. I think it's only Australia and South Africa and Uganda that really took a very hard stance in all this COVID thing, in totally killing the economy and the middle class. So how many of those people have retired at the age of 30 because they lost their jobs and are struggling and have families to feed and they have immediate needs? Now, when you talk of retirement, the way it is there, if somebody has a job and if he loses one, there's a huge likelihood he's going to get another one very soon and another one soon after. So the whole idea of mid-term access was because of the economic conditions that had been set by COVID. And by COVID, I don't mean the sickness, I mean the measures, the draconian measures that were used to handle the sickness, and the number of people who had lost the source of income. And then we are talking about 20%. There is 80% left. So now what is wrong with somebody who has lost his job, whether he has lost it or not, but maybe who is earning less or who has more mouth to feed because somehow a relative or so has lost a job and perhaps needs some help here and there, getting just 1/5 of what they are due as they wait for the retirement. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that as far as I'm concerned, because this is a crisis. Nobody foresaw a scenario where you had to close the economy for some virus. But anyhow, all said, the solution to this whole NSSF thing is, I'll tell you what I would do if I had the powers to. I would just liberalize the whole saving thing. Because the reason people have
If we cannot trust government, how will we trust probably private parties that come in? Already Alex is telling you about the mistrust.
No, let me tell you, we are better off trusting private. You ask anybody between government and private companies who they will trust. I can guarantee you, like, only perhaps 0.0001% will say they trust government. Nobody trusts government. Even government does not trust government. So what you do, and what was there before, actually, I remember when I was, still working, fully employed, there were all these insurance companies which were offering very good saving schemes. And now it was not a must that every company had to go like. And so I remember that I was saving, I think, in Jubilee Insurance as a New Vision until they passed that law. Everyone has to go to, you know,
the circle.
To NSSF.
Okay.
Now, when the law was passed, the money which we had been saving in Jubilee was given to every one of us, and it was a nice boom because, okay, now we are closing this thing, so get your money. Now the money is going to have to start going to NSSF. So the thing is, what the advantage of that is, number one, people don't have this thing that government is just going and picking money out of, you know, their savings. That's not a good thing because they don't trust the government. They don't even trust the reasons for which they go and get that money. And that has been the issue. You know, you had the former Minister of Gender, Bakoko Bakuru, in some, you know, show in America called Follow the Money, talking about how Salim Saleh would come and say, I want $5 million, then so and so comes and says, then the next thing, some other, you know, member of the royal family comes, and they just come and pick money, and the money is there. And we know that these people cannot look at money anywhere, and they do not feel the entitlement to go and get that money. Now, we all know that, as we know that they feel even entitled to money which has spent 9 months on your account. And they say that should be our money. Like, they think all money belongs to them. Okay? And that's how, so now we are in a serious problem where liberalize the saving thing. Say everybody has to save. If you have a salary, let's say above this amount, you are supposed to save by law. But where you save is up to you. It's not up to government. So then all saving schemes, maybe insurance companies and so on, come and compete for your money, for your saving money, and say we are giving you a better interest rate than NSSF. So come and put your money with us. We can give you, they give you better conditions. So that you as a saver have, first of all, there is a law that requires that you save so that we keep the culture. But then there are companies competing and saying we have better rates. And we are not going to hear a minister or the president's brother coming and saying, I want money from there. It's not going to happen. Ours is professionally run, and a lot of these insurance companies have saving schemes which are very professionally run, and people would trust them a lot more than they trust NSSF. That's the problem. Now, you remember the case where people were falling down from how many floors on NSSF?
Yes.
That's all the money they have waited. You know, there are people who are waiting to reach 50 years. People usually don't want to reach 50, you see, because they want to stay young. But because you have no money, and the only money you look around, and the only money you expect to ever get is when you reach 50. So you wait for your 50th birthday at 55.
So you can be able to get the money.
Can you imagine when people are trying to stay young, like, you know, now for you are waiting for 55 on your 51st birthday. The first thing you do is you carry your birth certificate and go to NSSF. You've been waiting 10 years for that money, 10 years since you lost your job, or even more. And then you get there, and then you see the process is bureaucracy. Then you remember the stories of, people were falling down from many floors, and they just, pam, one dead. The next day, pam, another one dead. Just liberalize the industry. Get that money out of government hands, because government is full of thieves. Let people who choose to go to NSSF go there. Because it worried me that even the boss of NSF, Mr. Byarugaba, was saying, no, don't give the midterm access. I'm saying, first of all, you're giving the midterm access to people who are of a certain age, okay, who are only 10 years away from getting the 100%. You're giving them 20%. You should be able to get that money. You're not giving them 100%. It
has been invested to be able to get more money that will give you a better interest.
That even if the bank does not invest all your money, you should be able to go and at least claim some.
Access some.
So now, what we are saying is that we are only a few small percentage actually are going to get that money.
Yeah, true.
Those
93,000 out of the 2 million savers.
Now, most of the savers actually below 45, and those who are 45 and above, we are only 10 years away from getting their whole money anyway. And now they are only asking for 20%.
And there are other exceptions anyway. If you're crossing from private sector to government, you definitely can be able to get money.
Now, what is the problem? The problem is that NSSF is an ATM for the government. Now, we should liberalize. That's what I would do. The first thing I would do, liberalize saving.
Okay.
Let everybody compete and come and tell Kabuleta, if you want to save with me, I'm giving you 12% interest. Then somebody comes and says, I'm giving you 15% interest. I'm just speaking figures. And I have a choice of which one to take.
Okay. Well, it's an interesting discussion that's coming through, but there are more terms and conditions that have to be applied. For example, if you're doing voluntary saving.
I just wanted to, I think if anybody claim to love Ugandans more than they love themselves.
And I will expect a headline of the week or song dedication. We've not done that in a bit.
Yeah, but I want to say this universal saving, something has to be done, you know, to especially include the people who do not have salary, you know, but have money, but somehow, given the nature of our spending habits as Ugandans, as Africans, compared maybe to our Asian neighbors, the way they tend to be able to maintain money, our people need to be helped.
That's why the voluntary saving is coming through, at least for NSS.
But I don't think voluntary is enough. This country, during the colonial time, early independence times, had actually per adult commitment to pay. It was called the tax then. For me, I don't want a tax now.
Graduated tax.
Can we replace graduated tax or adult tax with adult saving as a law?
Okay.
First of all,
adult saving
let me
as
say
a
this
law.
in 30 seconds.
Maybe as he concludes, just as he concludes. Conclude with your thought. I will go to Joseph shortly.
Yeah, I'm saying...
You want it to be compulsory. You're an adult.
Yes.
Start saving.
No, start saving. It's for your own good. And first of all, it will even increase the ability of the country to be banked. Now we have all these mobile money systems. There's so many ways in which money... But people need to be helped to keep something for themselves. You know, someone told me, and I agree, if you can eat, you can save. If you can eat, you can save.
Okay.
So don't say I'm too poor.
No, here's the thing. Imagine somebody gets a salary of 1 million, and those are very, very few Ugandans, but they get a salary, a gross salary of 1 million. Now, by the time you take off pay as you earn, and a few other taxes, is under 700,000. Now, he's expected to have a certain, life. Yes. And he has probably 600,000 that is left to pay rent, transport himself to work, probably has a wife and dependents and so on. And now, if he saves, let's say, even if he saves 100,000 of the million, he is somebody who has a very strong saving culture in a month. If he saves the 100,000, just 10%. However, look at the inflation rate, the rate of inflation. How much would that 100,000 be, the 1.2 million that he would save at the end of a year? How much would it be in terms of purchasing value because of inflation? Because some people at the top are printing money, even illegally, and are distributing money in a very crazy way, and inflation is going out of the roof, and then the savers are suffering as a result of that, because you have money which was worth something when you actually put it away, but whose value has completely diminished by the time you go there to try and get it. The things it can do have reduced. So and I'm talking about somebody who has a salary of 1 million, and those are very few in the country, a small percentage.
That's true.
And yet, even they would struggle to really be proper savers.
Kabuleta, the worst inflation is the stomach. Once it goes into, you will never recover it.
This saving culture is a mindset.
It is.
There are people who earn less than 200,000, but they have saved more money than people who earn above
1 million. Yes.
So it's a mindset we need to.
I know.
Me, I've been saving all my work life. I've either saved through a cooperative society at the Monterey Cooperative Union. Of course, then there's NSSF, which is forced saving. And then I transited to the Mazima retirement benefits, voluntary retirement scheme. I think it is a culture. Even if you save 5,000, even if you say I'm going to save 5,000 a month, it is a good culture.
You know,
in
places, in many communities like, that's where I come from, it was actually part of the tradition that you start from a chicken to a cow. That was saving.
Absolutely.
Until they came
But it still takes us back. I may not think about saving that 10,000 when I am not sure about my next meal, or I don't know if I can pay rent. I don't know if I can have the basic necessities. But it's a discussion I think that we need to be taking as a country. Now, gentlemen, you are all senior journalists, and I would just like you to get, what would be your preferred headline of the week if you were an editor? I'll start with you, Ale. Alex? Out of the so many stories that you've paid attention to, that we've discussed and those that we've not discussed.
I think the NSSF, the access to midterm is a key story.
So what would be your headline?
Because the back and forth, of course, now people are able to access their savings midterm, and we want to see how the people who are managing how they will react. We should rally people to go and start the process.
I'm waiting for that headline. You've explained to me what the story would be, but I'm waiting for that headline, yes.
The NSSF money is there for people to enjoy.
NSSF money is there for people to enjoy. That would be an interesting one. It would be catchy. I would want to flip through the papers and find out what the story is.
That was, when I used to write the headline, that was my thought process.
Okay, well, Honor, what would be your headline of the week if you were to write one?
Janet Power.
Just that, yes. Janet Power. Wow, I bet you not. Everyone would want to read what that power is and the personality behind. And to you, what would be your headline of the week, Mr. Kabuleta?
Perhaps doctors' conditions met and their industry action called off, okay, and they get back to work. That's very urgent because there are so many people who suffer as a result of those people having everything they agreed with the president not being met. They have met him so many times.
So many.
And all the promises made have either at half or 20% been fulfilled. Promises and so on. There's interns who haven't been paid. They are paid only 750,000. Their salary structure that they agreed to, they never did get there. He promised them some money for a circle. Typical Museveni, they didn't ask for that. He promised it himself, but he hasn't even paid that. He gave 1 billion out of the 5 he promised.
So what would be your headline?
My headline would be that the doctors meet with, their conditions have been met and they have called off.
Doctors' conditions met, strike called off.
Strike called off.
No, I can help him as I used to be said it, sir. Doctors treated. Yeah.
That was a good one.
When Ona was my editor, but, and everything I learned by them from him, it was called the sensational crusader. Some of the headlines, some of the headlines were very spicy. I remember them to this day. So
and Honor, if you were to switch up, if you were to be his editor and just switch up, I love the two statements. Yes. Doctors treated, Janet Power. Well, how would you, get his headline captured in just the shortest? He talked about NSSF money
released to be
enjoyed. How would you break that down if you were talking about NSSF?
NSSF, time to smile.
Because you're also smiling already and salivating. So ladies and gentlemen, we have to end up this. Thank you, Mr. Joseph Kabuleta, for coming through. Mr. Onapito, it's always a pleasure. And Alex Arenito, it's always a pleasure as well, sparing your morning hours to be with us. We can continue with the discussion online. And my first question during the discussion here was what you think about the government fleet management system. How can that be done? The second would be, how do we promote a saving culture? Let's get your views on at NBS TV on Twitter, NBS Television on Facebook, and Next Media Services on YouTube. I am Mildred Tuhaisa. Thank you so much for joining us. A good morning and God bless you. But there is a lot more information you can be able to find on the Morning Express on Sanyuka Television. Just tune in and have a blessed day.